Light rain falls from the sky, gently tapping against the hood on Nix's cloak as she follows the footsteps of the man ahead. It taps slightly over awnings, the storefronts closed yet streets still packed by the permanent accents drawing eyes to their packed-up goods. Each offers seconds spare from the rain, with a sound almost calming as they continue along the stone pavements. The tapping on her hood remains rhythmic, light enough to remain pleasant without dropping into a nuisance, just yet. Getting home through the mud may change their sentiments, yet stone below playfully splashes as a new puddle grows under their steps. It's always better when it rains and she can spend the evening up at the mountain lake, covered by trees and listening to the softer tapping as droplets meet the surface. Unfortunately, on this night, she's continuously guided through the dim streets. People aren't out much tonight, the promise of a storm being enough to dissuade the more sane of people. Cold chills warm the soft yellow glow pouring out from most windows, the curtains doing little as shadows shift behind the fabric. It's a sight Nix has to ignore, has to physically turn away from. A life like that has never been in her cards, and certainly isn't there now. No, her gaze tracks the path ahead, and behind, ears listening below the patter of the rain as she dodges another puddle, unable to prevent the splash echoing underfoot. First Arden, and then her own, as she tugs at the edge of her cloak until it sits closer to her frame. He's not said where they needed to go, only ordered that she joins him for the night as the rest of the council remain cosy underground with their hot teas and blankets. He knows where they're going, and why. The council is all clued in on what's happening tonight. Nix? She's just following along. It's all part of the new orders, she supposes, not letting herself dwell or consider it too long. Keep a blade ready at all seconds, he finally mutters to the dark, turning their final corner into yet another silent street. This one doesn't stand out too much. Not more than any of the others they've passed through this evening. The narrow pavements are still covered by shop awnings and hanging signs, yet the road remains clear for any sort of traffic that frequents it. The holes in the road could possibly afford repair, narrow channels marked into stone. Of course, she straightens her posture with each step, a familiar building coming into view. From the outside it isn't anything special. The hanging sign depicts one of the older kings, the exact one being subject of a debate for the regulars, as it sways slightly in the growing wind. It shares the spirit of other streets, as flickering lanterns sit in the windows, as others hang by the doors with bright flowers, decorating their sills. Curtains are pulled back, tied open, as the scenes inside remain on show for all to see. This is the door that the pair approach. Tables remain crowded by all sorts of patrons, most of which seem innocent enough. Tired workers done with long shifts talk animatedly between themselves as staff continue to meet the requests. It must have been payday recently. Almost every table is packed with groups casually talking, and the bar is packed as well. Staff making small talk with the regulars. Those barely occupy Nix's attention. Honestly, she looks at them for not even a second before disregarding them. Figures shifting in the corner maybe are afforded 2 seconds, their conversations hushed as each hunch towards their company. Whispers of winged people can be put aside, however, as they're not all that relevant to our current tale being spun. Not even slightly. I mean, they're talking of rumours far across an ocean, far from the Tyrellian Empire. At least it is unlikely they work for Arden. Nix can afford them that much of hope before turning away from that particular conversation. Yet, our pair continues towards the stairs tucked to the side. Nothing more than a wave to one of the women at the bar before her gaze is turned back to the customer signalling for another drink, and asking about her recent painting. None of the staff pay them any mind beyond that. All are too busy with the evening's demands, and Arden is just another face in the crowd. A face they know, mind you. Arden's hold of the dark stretches far, whispers passing through each of the stretching mess of roots tightly coiled around the capital, all echoing back to him. Stairs creak underfoot. The woods protest going ignored as we follow them up into a dim hallway. It's almost like the other night. Nix can almost laugh at the slight irony to how each hall seems the same. The tattered rug is in slightly better condition, lining the middle of the hallway yet keeping both sides of the floor exposed, and the decorations a little more tasteful. White pierces the dull hall, orange accompanying it at the top of the side tables pushed a short way from the rug. One passing glance draws the eye towards the crowded bouquet. The white datura sitting at the heart of it as begonias bloom bright around it, all outshining the plain vase mostly blocked by the decorative leaves. It looks real enough. The plants, that is. Even under Nix's critical glance, they seem real rather than a cheaper imitation for the tavern to display. Maybe it's their visit? It's plausible. That of an earth manipulator skilled with their plants to keep the blooms living and bright between days. Either way, it's the main clue around as the pair continue further into the unseen shadows of the upper floors. Well, at least until they approach one of the doors ending a hallway. This one no different from the rest. The door at the end of the hall sits open, a single slit of light spilling carelessly into the hall without a shade to block it. Nix's gaze assesses the area for a moment, her step never faltering as she remains behind Arden, yet ready to move ahead should his hand flick a signal. "Oh, good evening, Duke Sal." Arden strides ahead into the room. Nix falling to her position at the side of the door, next to a man a head taller than her. Shall we get straight to matters of business for the evening? She allows herself a moment to watch the room, and we will share this with her, as the false pleasantries are exchanged. Sal sits by the window, leaning back in the armchair with a small table to his side tucked below the grimy window. Outside isn't beyond expectations, rain still hitting the outer layer of glass whilst the sparse, dying beams of daylight die between the roofs across the road, as they manage to pierce through the gaps in the clouds. Her monitoring gaze earns a glare from the Duke, his amber eyes assessing the more unusual girl chosen as the man's company for the meeting. Sal knew of the guard. It had been the non-negotiable term in any discussion, as he brought one of his own. Either they came alone, or each had company in even numbers, a term Arden only settled on due to this man's rank. Nix's eyes still shift under the harsher rays, fading yellow accentuating the deeper lilacs, currently shifting past another wave of blue ripples from her left to right eye. Thankfully the ray is weak, with the weather drowning it, suffocating the gap and reclaiming its ground. She only meets Sal's scrutiny as his glance shifts to the common debate around her hair. Interesting, isn't she? Arden instead indulges. He makes a show of sighing heavily, shoulders heaving at the motion, with a stray hand polishing the lens of his glasses. Anything to seem busy as he matches the relaxed lean in the second chair offered. Anything to be disinterested. Quite unusual to see someone tied so much to an element far from the cause. Born around here? Sal questions. It masks the glance at Arden's jacket. Today the shifting shade pulls from the room's corners without a single tell that it's Arden doing the work passively. Yet it sits at his waist with little thought. The Duke doesn't make the connection. It seems that Arden's connection was as deep as the girl's, stood silently by the door. Her? I hardly see how it's of any relevance. I didn't come here to discuss my guard, and you don't see me asking why yours is blind in one eye or injured. It's a fair question too. If Nix was willing to break her rules, she would be able to peer around the taller, broader guard and take note of the bandage peeking at the collar. She won't, though. Her favour remains with not annoying Arden with childish curiosity after all, which means she stays monitoring. A gaze focuses out on the roof of the window, just a random point, yet the peripheral tracks Sal and the man to her side, all without giving away her focus. The hands, tucked behind her back, below the cloak, wait to flick one of the shadows from the ground to her order. You're quite right. I suppose my need for you is rather straightforward. My most loyal of guards are always at my side, see, and the royals are fairly acquainted with their faces or voice. You're little more than shadows in the forest, leeching off your betters. Arden's dealt with nobles before. Nobles, mind you, who are far better at weaving insults in with their compliments and veiling them behind a facade of kindness. Sal, he doesn't even try, isn't close to skilled if this is his attempt. Part of his mind itches to give the signal, yet he does well enough to keep a hand firmly on the side of the chair without barely a twitch. If his hand raises, Nix will strike before the man's guard has time to blink. It's the only way he calms the urge to silence the man mid-boasting at this moment. But customers like this often pay a dearer price. Arden can just keep adding to the demanded payment for each insult thrown into conversation and send someone to deal with the threat if he so desires later. Wouldn't come close to the first time, and I personally doubt it would come close to being the last. He doesn't exactly need their money at the moment, most operations running smoothly enough to uphold the system, with the task taking one of his ranks a week at most if Sal upped his security or caught wind of such plots. I suppose nobles would see it that way whilst buying others to do the dirty work. What is it you actually want, or I will not hesitate to walk away? Freelancers are such a nuisance to locate, especially around my domain. He's been kind today. Nix processes. Half surprised she hasn't seen the gesture quite yet. Not even the one to scare the man or let him walk away with a wound to remember such meetings. though a straight face staring out to the roof across the way reveals nothing. It certainly doesn't betray the glances warily watching for any missed cues wanting a dagger to the man's throat. She assesses the man, the way he talks and sits. The sort of recline is daring, comfortable in one of Arden's private rooms reserved for work tangled closest to himself. This Duke Sal is unusual, even to Nyx. The guard staying might have been the agreement, yet a strange one despite his rank. Arden is here anyway. He had her remove the source who gave the Earls the details of his system, yet still agreed to meet with them. This all could have been a trap planned by the royals, a bid for favour hardly new. Very well, I need you to stage a kidnapping. Wait a moment, wait. Did Nyx just hear that right? Did Arden? No, did I hear that right? He's hiring the area's controlling underground group to pretend to kidnap someone. And Arden is that leader. Duke Sal Vertices has the audacity to summon Arden himself inside of the capital's walls over nothing more than a pathetic stage production, as if his entire organisation, all of the Eternal Underground, is little more than a troupe of actors. Nobles are something else. Their heads seem to be so far up in the clouds they forget what reality even means. Arden doesn't give away how his blood begins to boil below his skin, or how the shadows he ties to his jacket seem to flare for a second at the sheer insult at hand. Who does this guy think he is? Yet Nyx has a sharper, crystal-like blade ready behind her back within seconds of the response. Stage. For what it's worth, Arden's voice remains smooth. Calm, even. He's in control. Sal's words had no effect on him as far as the company can care to tell. To Nyx, she can only hold her breath and hope for perfection. Silence stretches for a moment, neither man wishing to speak and surrender control to the other. Sal by answering Arden, and the latter not wishing to clarify the question. It's clear enough, everyone in the room knows what's being asked. Why would you illegally hire an underground organisation to merely pretend to kidnap someone? Sal has armies. I won't hide that from you. Next to his esteemed higher ranks loyal to him before the crown, he has newer recruits with malleable values and others who will blindly follow any order given. Not to mention his influence over the western regions. Yes, the Shadow's heart lies in one of his cities, the main settlement nearest to his primary estate even, but that overshadows the towns, villages and major trade routes he has a hand over. All of that at risk by hiring someone and some shady group for a false kidnapping. I side with Nyx. What is this man thinking sometimes? Yes, there are no more titles for me to gain above Duke, and families currently sit even to myself. Their land equal to mine, their ties as secure as mine. Heirs are secured for their roles. You can see my issue. Elaborate. Arden can't see the issue. Nyx can't either. Their lives in the shadows frees them from the assaults of considerations and plots. The never-ending schemes for power that ultimately grants very little. The closest thing Arden has to compare it to? Whenever some ambitious nobody thinks they can take over his system. Force the control from his hands into theirs with whispers and force. Most approach his counsel though, and he only hears of the events once such figures have been silenced. Besides, these two things aren't connected. He craves power, so wants to fake a kidnapping of an unstated target so far. Nyx just waits, keeping the swirling shadow out of sight just in case he begins rambling too far or Arden makes the gesture whilst the man talks. It wouldn't be the first time that's happened after a ridiculous demand. Reputation is my best choice, short of stealing the crown for myself. It's cleaner too, less bloodshed. Sal continues to lounge back in his seat, legs crossing over the other as he affords a glance to Nyx, meeting her attention as if some joke has been said. I'm sure the local theatre group would love the opportunity you're offering. As of now, this isn't worth our time, nor our skill. That should be the end, if Arden has his way. Yet Sal continues. The princess is hardly my concern whilst you have her. Demand a ransom, gather information, do what you want. You should be thankful that I'm even allowing you such an expensive target. The princess. He keeps getting worse with each detail. A joke kidnapping of the Emperor's darling, beloved child protected by only the best guards? All of that risk for what? Each section of the underground would be under close watch for months. No matter the contract. Basic thieving would be 10 times harder, more people struggling to earn their share. A concern of Nix's for herself, rather than one from Arden. Though she knows the glint in Arden's gaze. It isn't of anger, that one more of a flare signalling danger to anyone unfortunate enough to notice it. But it is calculating. This man found one tail of Arden's web, a loose-lipped informant who cracked under basic pressure. Appeasing him this once could be useful. Keeps him from gaining favour by removing a small group in the mountains instead. If we wanted issues with the Crown, we would have acted against them months ago. You'll need more to convince me of this risk. One simple sentence, yet negotiations open. The floor hearing any reasonable offer. Name and price. A better outcome than it could have been. Nix is the first to admit that, even if only to her own mind. The guard at her side eases his shoulders, relaxing as his boss is willing to hear different offers and demands, yet keeps a hand close to his sword should this be the part where it turns south. His gaze tracks the small girl at his side, shorter than most her own age, let alone against those older, trying to work out why exactly she was brought. No answers will be found there for this stranger. 1,000 gold would be a good base. You are asking us to take on a lot of attention, a lot of eyes. The underground prefers shadows, after all. We will also be reserving the right to take matters into our own hands, should you direct them from the web at any point or refuse to pay. So no money, we may not have a crown princess much longer. Very well, I will only be paying you once I have control of the case. Arden clocks that term, not raising any further attention to the subtle catch Sal's trying to sneak in. Everyone tries it, if they have money to back their name, adding something to protect them from actually having to deliver when the time comes. Though Sal is confident they'll just hand him the case. When the princess goes missing, everyone would be on higher guard, the systems of the tunnels likely having to hold the rest of their more daring lines of work. No worries. If Sal fails his command, fails to deliver the promised payment, Arden can find other ways about going about this. It would be the gold as well as any ransom we demand. This is Sal's turn to grow a little sour. 1,000 gold isn't a small amount, certainly not for something as simple as a kidnapping regardless of the target. He's at least somewhat aware that this man, this stain on the Empire's good name, is trying to scam him. Isn't much of a concern. Once he has the Crown listening to his every word rather than the muttering of families lower than his name, then his name's history. The money would be of little concern. He does make a note to later refine the plans and have them sent across. A mere ransom isn't going to do his reputation much good. The Emperor himself could pay a ransom double the 1,000 gold already stated as a demand, whilst it barely makes a dent to their personal funds, and have everything resolved in a matter of hours if one is offered. Instead, there needs to be some risk, a false threat that Lyra herself believes so that he can save her from it, something to make her sing his praise on return. Then I expect your best would be handling this. I don't expect you to understand this in any capacity. Politics is confusing for the likes of you. I'll give you another view into Arden for now. The only reason he hasn't ordered this man dead here and now is because of the money. Once he pays, Arden is considering a small personal project of ruining this pitiful excuse of a man. He desperately wishes he could raise his hand and be rid of the pest poking at his masterpiece of a network, and more than once has he considered just giving Nix the sign, giving her the order to at least bring him down to reality. He refrains, though. Easy money is hardly something to turn down. I'll set my guard to the task. You can expect a shadow will find you once I expect my payment and the amount I am demanding. Take it as a ransom, as a demand, or as proof I've done my job. More than you do. You're welcome, by the way, for not setting the trap I originally contemplated. I can confidently assure you that Lyra will be present in the Shadow's capital home in the coming days. It's your best opening. Arden stands at this, being the first to rise and finish whatever shambles of a meeting this is. Sure, they came to a deal, but one built on sand. With one hand on the door, Nix finally breaks her stance and dismisses the shadow behind her back. He pauses to turn back for little more than a moment, the final words being stolen in answer to the other's threat. And you're welcome I didn't order your death. It would have been so easy. It lingers in the air, Arden's jacket shifting for a moment as the fabric's edge comes to sight, sitting where the shadows have been resting today. As the previous hem sharpens, each shard remains jagged and broken, splitting into further smaller crystals at little more than the clenching of a fist. Hey everybody, thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I am so sorry about the delay between the two videos from when I've last uploaded. I originally had this all recorded like a few weeks ago, but due to a few going-ons, I've obviously been delayed in editing this video, doing the artwork for it, but hopefully I will be able to go back to a more consistent schedule, as I really do enjoy creating these videos and actually being able to do this art, tell the story and all of that sort of stuff. So with things kind of settling down and all that now, I hope you stick around and tune in for the next episode. Have a wonderful day.